What happens when a loving daughter gives her mother a house, but her own husband immediately kicks her out into the garage? You won't believe how this strong woman, once thought powerless, turns the tables in the most unexpected way. If you're anything like me, you've probably spent a lifetime building, nurturing, and pouring your soul into your family, believing that love and loyalty were the cornerstones of your world. Well, let me tell you, sometimes those cornerstones turn out to be nothing but dust. This old house, for instance, filled with the ghosts of laughter and the lingering scent of my late husband James's pipe tobacco, was more than just some structure of wood and brick. It was my very essence, a living, breathing testament to a love story that spanned more decades than I care to count. And my sweet Emily, my only daughter, knew exactly how much this sacred space meant to me. She'd grown up within these walls, twirling in her prom dress in the living room, giggling with friends in the kitchen, finding comfort in every creaky floorboard. So, when she approached me recently, her eyes shimmering with what I mistook for pure, unadulterated affection, and offered to put the entire property in my name, just to make things easier, Mom, so you can truly relax and enjoy your golden years, free from any worries about property taxes or inheritance nonsense. My heart didn't just swell, it practically exploded with maternal pride. Why would I hesitate? This was Emily, for heaven's sake, my flesh and blood, the child I trusted implicitly since the moment she drew her first breath. We sat there in the notary's office, the stale air thick with the aroma of old paper and the drone of legal mumbo-jumbo. Emily's hand, so small when I first held it, now rested warmly on mine as she signed the final, official-looking documents. "It's yours, Mom," she murmured, her voice soft and reassuring. "All yours. You deserve nothing less." I remember actually smiling, a genuine, unburdened smile, envisioning blissful mornings on the porch swing, sipping my coffee, watching the robins peck at the lawn. To celebrate this monumental act of generosity, I'd even baked her favorite apple pie, the kind with an extra dusting of cinnamon, its sweet, comforting aroma filling my kitchen, a stark, almost cruel contrast to the bitter reality that was about to smack me right in the face. I pictured us later, mother and daughter, sharing slices and quiet stories, basking in the glow of our newly reaffirmed, unbreakable bond. Oh, the blissful naivete of it all. But that peaceful evening, so perfectly set like a tableau from a Hallmark card, shattered with the sudden, jarring sound of angry voices. Emily and her husband, Brian, that pompous, overgrown man-child she'd somehow managed to snare, were clearly engaged in one of their infamous ear-splitting squabbles the very moment they walked through the front door. The shouts grew louder, then a sickening, muffled thud, followed by the unmistakable click of the front door. My heart, which had been so full just moments before, began to pound against my ribs like a frantic, trapped bird. Moments later, my bedroom door wasn't just opened, it was practically flung open. There stood Emily, her face ashen, tears streaming down her cheeks, her usually neat hair disheveled as if she'd been caught in a whirlwind. "Mom," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper, a ragged gasp. "Brian, he said I have to go to the garage. He just threw me out of the house." My entire world tilted precariously on its axis. The pie, still cooling innocently on the counter, suddenly seemed like a grotesque joke. My daughter, my vibrant, gentle, loving Emily, cast out of her own home, a home that, with such selfless grace she had gifted to me mere hours ago, by that thing she dared to call a husband? I pulled her into my arms, the sheer visceral shock of it vibrating through every single fiber of my being. I tried to offer comfort, to murmur reassurances, but my own mind, usually a well-ordered filing cabinet of logical thoughts, spun wildly, desperately trying to grasp the breathtaking audacity, the cold-hearted, calculated cruelty of his actions. How could any man, let alone her supposed life partner, inflict such a profound, soul-deep wound upon my child? It was beyond comprehension. The sweet warmth of the pie, the innocent joy of the day, all of it evaporated, instantly replaced by a chilling, nauseating realization. Something truly awful, something truly heinous had just begun, and I, the mother, was now caught right in the middle of it. What happened next? Changed everything. You won't want to miss how this shocking betrayal unraveled, piece by piece.
That first night, watching Emily, my beautiful daughter, huddled in that godforsaken garage, was an agony that twisted my gut into knots. The biting cold of the concrete floor, the pervasive, sickening smell of stale gasoline and old tires. I could practically feel it seeping into her bones, even from my own bedroom, just a few yards across the yard. Through those thin, drafty walls, I heard her muffled sobs, each one a raw, jagged dagger piercing my own heart. Sleep? That was an impossible luxury, a cruel joke. My mind, a frantic projector, replayed the scene over and over. Emily's tear-streaked face, the utter desolation etched in her once bright eyes. How, I tormented myself, had my vibrant, fiercely independent daughter, the girl who once commanded a room with her infectious laughter, been reduced to this trembling, broken creature, huddled in a glorified shed? It was a question that gnawed at me, relentless and sharp, a constant throbbing ache behind my eyes. The next morning, fueled by a desperate, simmering need for answers, and more importantly, for justice, I ambushed Brian as he sauntered out to his gleaming, obscenely oversized SUV. He moved with the kind of smug, self-satisfied confidence only a man utterly devoid of empathy can possess, as if the world was his personal playground. "Brian?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady and authoritative. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? Why is Emily out there in that garage?" He didn't even bother to turn his head, merely offering a dismissive shrug, a flippant flick of his hand. "Mary, honestly, this is between me and Emily. It's none of your damn business. She earned it, okay?" He practically spat out the words, his tone dripping with a condescending indifference that made my blood run cold. A toxic mix of casual cruelty and utter disdain. Then he simply slid into his car, the expensive leather seats groaning in protest beneath his ample frame, and slammed the door shut with a finality that echoed in the morning air, leaving me standing there, utterly dumbfounded, my mouth agape. She earned it? The sheer gall, the breathtaking audacity, the outright arrogance of that man. How dared he speak about my daughter, my precious, irreplaceable Emily, with such callous contempt? A slow, burning, visceral rage, hot and unforgiving, began to bubble beneath my usually calm, collected exterior. The days that followed blurred into a torturous, soul-crushing cycle of quiet, dehumanizing humiliation for Emily and a seething, incandescent indignation for me. Brian, that self-proclaimed king of his castle, maintained his tyrannical reign over the main house, denying Emily access except for the bare minimum of household chores, which he was forced to perform under his watchful, critical eye. He'd leave her meager, often cold, unappetizing scraps of food, literally yesterday's leftovers, as if she were some unwanted, mangy stray, not his actual wife. He even started locking the doors behind him, often deliberately, leaving Emily stranded outside, sometimes for hours, even during a sudden chilling downpour if she happened to step out for a breath of fresh air. It was a calculated, petty, and undeniably cruel display of control, a systematic chipping away at her spirit. Her once neat, cherished belongings, her personal treasures, were now haphazardly piled in a dusty, forgotten corner of the garage, a stark, heartbreaking visual representation of her new, desolate reality. I watched my daughter, my once bright, spirited Emily, slowly wither before my very eyes, each passing day stealing a little more of her light. Every single indignity she suffered, every dismissive glance, every cruel word felt like a personal affront to me, her mother, a woman who had always strived to shield and protect her child. My heart was a bruised, aching mess. But beneath the profound pain, a fierce, unwavering determination began to ignite. He wouldn't break her. Not on my watch. Not a chance in hell.
This is the turning point, folks. Everything you've been waiting for, the payoff, the reckoning, is right here. Stick around to witness how our heroine finally puts that insufferable man in his place. Emily's despondency, her quiet, defeated despair, was the ultimate agonizing straw. It sliced through my heart like a surgeon's scalpel, sharp and precise, removing any lingering doubt about what needed to be done. I knew, with a certainty that vibrated through every single fiber of my being, that I had to act, and I had to act now. This wasn't just about my daughter's comfort. It was about her very spirit, her self-worth, her right to simply exist without being systematically dismantled. But how? Brian was a cunning, manipulative weasel, a master of emotional warfare who had systematically stripped Emily of her confidence and self-worth, replacing it with a suffocating cloud of doubt and fear. Any direct confrontation from me would likely backfire, leaving my daughter even more vulnerable, even more broken, subjected to further sadistic lessons from her husband. No, I needed a plan. A strategy so precise, so utterly unexpected, that it would hit him where it hurt most, his inflated ego and even fatter wallet, without him ever suspecting my involvement and, more importantly, without further harming my precious Emily. This required subtlety, cunning, and a dose of good old-fashioned maternal rage. All day long as I went about my chores that, ironically, Emily was still forced to assist me with, under Brian's watchful, self-satisfied eye, my mind raced. It felt like a supercomputer in overdrive, processing every insult, every slight, every bit of financial nonsense I'd ever overheard Brian spewing. I sifted through old memories, fragments of whispered conversations with James about our own financial dealings, about the subtle art of being shrewd, of understanding leverage, of knowing when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em. And then, like a lightning bolt striking a clear blue sky, a thought, cold and brilliantly clear as mountain spring water, crystallized in my mind. Brian. That man was utterly, hopelessly, pathetically obsessed with money, with big money. He was always blustering about grand purchases, flashy toys he couldn't quite afford, always chasing the illusion of wealth, the veneer of success. Image is everything, he'd often boast, as if that excused his perpetual financial precariousness. Perhaps, I mused, with a grim satisfaction, there lay his Achilles heel, his one true vulnerability. My feet, almost on their own accord, carried me to Martha's house next door. Martha, my rock, my confidant for decades, had seen me through thick and thin, through James's illness and passing, through all of life's ugly surprises. Her keen, observant eyes missed absolutely nothing happening on our quiet street. I approached her under the perfectly believable guise of discussing my rapidly wilting petunias. A subtle nod to my current state, perhaps, but quickly, almost breathlessly, steered the conversation to Emily's predicament. Martha, seeing the storm clouds gathering in my usually calm, serene demeanor, listened intently, her brow furrowed with genuine concern, her lips pressed into a thin line of silent disapproval. I recounted Emily's misery, Brian's cruel, calculated eviction, the sickening, soul-destroying daily indignities my daughter was forced to endure. "Mary, that's absolutely outrageous!" she exclaimed, her own indignation mirroring mine, her voice rising with each word. "How dare he treat Emily like that? It's barbaric!" Her eyes, usually so placid, narrowed with a fierce, protective glint. "But what are you going to do?" she asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, leaning closer. I leaned in too, my voice dropping even lower, and laid out my nascent, audacious scheme. Martha's eyes widened in astonishment, then slowly a knowing, almost mischievous smile spread across her face. "Oh, Mary," she breathed, her voice filled with a delicious mix of surprise and admiration, a shared spark of rebellious glee. "That's brilliant. He'll never, ever see it coming." A surge of confidence, a long-forgotten sense of power, primal and fierce, coursed through me.
My plan, so recently a vague, desperate notion, was now a tangible, living thing waiting to be unleashed. And I, Mary Smith, was about to teach Brian a lesson he'd never forget.
Now, let's talk about the nitty-gritty, the juicy details that would make Brian's perfectly manicured world come crashing down. My plan hinged on one simple, undeniable truth about Brian. He was all show and no substance when it came to his finances. He loved flaunting his supposed wealth, but underneath it all, he was perpetually stretching himself thin, constantly on the brink of financial disaster, always chasing the next big, shiny toy. He was a master of appearances, a regular peacock, but his credit score was, to put it mildly, a train wreck. This was the critical weakness I planned to exploit. I dug out my dusty old address book, the one with numbers scratched out and new ones scrawled in the margins, and found the contact for an old friend from my church choir days, Frank Miller. Frank was a high-powered, discreet, and incredibly well-connected man who worked for one of the largest financial institutions in the city. He'd always had a soft spot for me, and I knew I could trust him to be utterly discreet. I called him, my voice pitched just right, friendly but with an underlying current of serious concern. "Frank, darling, long time no talk," I chirped, making sure to hit that sweet spot of amiable charm. "Listen, I've got a bit of a thorny situation on my hands, and I thought of you. You're just so brilliant with all things financial, and I need a little, shall we say, insight." I then launched into a carefully crafted, somewhat vague story about a less than reputable business associate who was making some questionable large purchases, and how I needed to assess my own risks as a result of some convoluted and entirely fabricated joint venture. I made it sound like a complex, high-stakes business maneuver, something Frank would eat right up. He, being the consummate professional and frankly a bit of a gossip, was hooked. He promised to discreetly pull some strings and dig up some information on this associate's financial dealings, especially anything related to upcoming major acquisitions in our area. The intel arrived swiftly, a neatly typed email attachment devoid of any incriminating sender information. It was a goldmine of financial woes. And there it was, glaringly obvious. Brian was indeed set to pick up his shiny, absurdly expensive, gas-guzzling money pit of an SUV tomorrow. And oh, the delicious irony. He was short a substantial, eye-watering amount. The email detailed his string of recent loan rejections from various banks, his credit score looking like a particularly bad seismic reading. This, I realized with a triumphant flutter in my chest, was my golden ticket. This was the precise moment. The email even listed the exact auto dealership, the specific bank that was, against all odds, hesitantly considering financing him, and, crucially, a little-known but absolutely vital banking requirement for loans of this magnitude. The bank needed a stability check, which meant obtaining consent from all registered residents of the property listed as the borrower's primary residence. Just a formality, they'd tell you, a bureaucratic hurdle to verify stability, but in Brian's case, it was a perfectly legal, utterly devastating loophole. A slow, profoundly satisfied smile spread across my face. The pieces of my elaborate, meticulously planned trap were falling into place with a horrifying elegance. Now all I had to do was wait for the precise, agonizing moment to spring it shut. Brian had no idea what was coming, and that, my dear readers, was the most satisfying part of all. The tension is practically suffocating, isn't it? You're on the edge of your seat, white-knuckling it, aren't you? What happens next will leave you absolutely speechless, quite possibly gasping for air. Whatever you do, don't dare look away, because this is the moment everything changes.
The morning dawned, crisp and cool, the kind of perfect summer day that usually promised nothing but sunshine and gentle breezes. Instead, it felt like the stage was being meticulously set for a grand, unholy showdown. While Brian, oblivious and utterly self-absorbed, was still lost in his self-important dreams, probably envisioning himself cruising down the highway in his ostentatious new ride, his ego inflating with every imaginary mile, I slipped out of the house. He, in his usual, predictably arrogant fashion, had parked his polished, oversized SUV directly beneath his bedroom window, as if to constantly admire his future prize. With a precision born of simmering fury and a healthy dose of pure, undiluted spite, I executed the first delicate phase of my plan. I approached his precious vehicle and, with a subtle flick of my wrist, placed a small, innocent-looking note on his windshield. It contained just a few potent words, stark and direct, and a phone number. Your deal might just go south. Call this number to find out why. I knew with absolute certainty that he'd spotted the very moment he emerged. He was far too vain, too utterly obsessed with his own possessions to miss anything that so much as touched his gleaming, expensive toy. The wait was exquisite, a silent torture for him, a quiet triumph for me. I pictured him, perhaps casually strolling out to his car, his mind already drifting to the new car smell, the roar of the engine. Then his eyes would fall on the note. Confusion, annoyance, and finally a prickle of genuine fear as he read the words. I practically hummed with anticipation. A few hours later, just as Brian was likely basking in the harsh fluorescent glow of the dealership showroom, probably charming the sales associate with his usual brand of bluster and false confidence, my old, barely used cell phone, the very one Emily had conveniently forgotten to confiscate along with all my dignity and self-respect, let out a shrill, insistent ring. It was him. His voice, usually dripping with condescension and arrogant superiority, was now laced with an almost comical blend of sputtering outrage and raw, naked panic. "What the hell is this, Mary? My deal just fell through. The bank is demanding some residency confirmation, and some old hag from the loan department, probably some sour old biddy with bad dentures if you ask me, said they don't have my consent. What are you playing at?" "Oh, that," I purred into the receiver, my voice sugar-sweet, utterly devoid of any genuine innocence or remorse. "You mean the little matter of consent for your rather substantial loan, Brian Digger? You do remember, don't you, that the house is legally, formally, and irrevocably mine now? All those papers Emily and I signed? Yeah, those. And without my explicit written consent, signed, sealed, and delivered, that bank isn't handing over a single solitary dime to you. I mean, a woman has to be careful, doesn't she? Can't just have any Tom, Dick, or Harry, or in this case, Brian, signing away my property rights, implying that a horde of strangers might soon be squatting in my house. And you see, I happen to be a very, very particular woman about such things, especially, Brian, when it comes to dealing with a person who thinks it's perfectly acceptable, even charming, to exile my own beloved daughter. My daughter, mind you, the one who gave me this house out of the kindness of her heart to sleep in a gasoline-fumed, drafty garage. I savored the silence on the other end, rich and satisfying. I could almost hear the rusted gears grinding in his tiny, greedy brain, frantically trying to process this unexpected, devastating blow. "Mary, you wouldn't dare!" he finally spluttered, his voice rising in a pitch of disbelieving fury, as if I were somehow violating an unspoken divine law. "Oh, Brian, darling, I not only dared, I've already done it. And you know what else? I won't be giving my consent until Emily is back in this house, safe,
sound, and properly settled, and until you apologize to her publicly in front of witnesses, and until she feels truly safe and respected here again. And just so we're absolutely clear, Brian, if this little arrangement with her in the garage continues for even one more miserable night, I will sell this house right out under your obnoxious little nose faster than you can say repossessed, and you'll be out on the street with your precious SUV dream shattered like cheap porcelain. Consider this my final offer." The line went dead with a definitive click, leaving a lingering hum of triumph in the air. A small, profound, and utterly victorious smile played on my lips. The game was far from over, but Brian had just been dealt a crippling blow, one he clearly never saw coming. The tension has been building, hasn't it? But trust me, you are not ready for the incredible culmination of this story. This is it. The moment of truth. You absolutely cannot miss how our protagonist takes back control and redefines her family's future. That very same afternoon, a mere 30 minutes after our delightful phone call, I watched from my kitchen window as Brian's luxury SUV, the one he'd boasted about incessantly, pulled into the driveway. He looked like a crumpled piece of paper, his usual swagger replaced by a defeated slump. He stomped towards the garage, and my heart, though still bruised, quickened with anticipation. A few agonizing minutes later, he emerged, and there was Emily, her face still streaked with tears, but in her eyes, a fragile, trembling spark of hope flickered. He was talking to her, his usual booming voice reduced to a low, defeated murmur, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I saw Brian actually bow his head. A small, utterly satisfying smile touched my lips. He was finally, truly broken. The fallout was swift and deliciously predictable. Brian's grand SUV deal, as I'd so kindly facilitated, went up in smoke. He was forced to cancel the order, a bitter pill for his inflated ego to swallow. The dealership, no doubt tired of his bluster and bad credit, didn't even shed a tear. A week later, he, gritting his teeth and radiating ill will like a toxic cloud, actually issued a public apology to Emily. It was a pathetic spectacle, delivered in front of a few stunned neighbors who pretended to be tending their roses, but were clearly enjoying every second of his humiliation. I watched from my kitchen window, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. It wasn't about vengeance, not entirely. It was about balance. Emily, my sweet girl, moved back into the house that day, back into her rightful place. The tension between them remained, a brittle, fragile truce, but Brian never dared to raise his voice or humiliate her again. He had been taught a harsh, unforgettable lesson. Seeing my daughter, finally safe and, more importantly, beginning to find her own inner strength, I made a decision. Not out of spite or lingering anger, but from a profound sense of peace. I sold the house. It wasn't about the property anymore. It was about Emily's independence. She no longer needed its walls as a shield, and I no longer needed to be its silent defender. I had given her her freedom from Brian's tyranny, a chance to rebuild her life on her own terms, and now it was my turn. I brought a charming, modest little cottage by a serene lake, a place where the only sounds would be the gentle lapping of water and the whispers of the wind through the trees. No more drama, no more battles, just peace. And a truly new beginning.